Hey guys, thanks so much for tuning in. We certainly do appreciate it. I want to take a moment to wish everybody a very happy new year. We thought we'd ring in the new year with our friend David Morgan from silver-investor.com, home of the Morgan Report, to talk about all things silver and gold, but mostly silver. David, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you, and Happy New Year to all as well.
2015 is certain to be a tumultuous year, both in terms of the economy and in terms of the plans of the powers that be. They want to move us into a one-world government, and I think ultimately someday, David, they would love to get us on a one-world currency, but libertarians and those that would favor freedom, guys like you, me, and our listeners, are certainly going to combat that every chance we get. Say, I wanted to start today in talking about this article from Ted Butler. There's been a lot of discussion about it over at SRS Rocco, of course, at your site, and over at Silver Doctors. Ted Butler is saying that J.P. Morgan has accumulated the largest physical silver position in history. He writes, "The Mint sells Silver Eagles at the prevailing price of silver on the day of the sale. In essence, the COMEX price of silver is the price of silver. By controlling the price of COMEX silver, J.P. Morgan sets the price at which it will buy Silver Eagles. It's the perfect crime. J.P. Morgan sets the price of COMEX silver and then demands as many coins as the Mint and its suppliers can produce, even if that means producing the coins on a 24/7 basis. Hey, that's the law. And remember, when J.P. Morgan increased its COMEX short position in the summer, assuring that prices were about to drop, what occurred as a result? Sales of Silver Eagles nosedived temporarily and only resumed after prices were brought lower by this crooked bank." David, the reason I wanted to read that is because there's been such a hubbub now about this article, and you nor I want to throw any truth tellers under the bus. Ted Butler's been at this game for a very long time, and we respect him, but I think you may disagree with his synopsis here. I thought it was pretty clever that he came up with this, because you and I both know when the price falls, people flee. I don't know why that is, but the retail buyer of precious metals is often gun-shy to buy when prices are falling. So what do you think accounts for all of this tremendous Silver Eagle demand that we've seen over the past 3 years?
Well, the increased demand, obviously, and so now we have to break down where's the increased demand coming from. And that's no one, Butler, myself, or anyone else knows exactly, because the way it's set up with the Mint is you have to be a defined dealer, I forget the exact terminology, but you have to be under the blessings of the Mint in order to buy in such huge quantity that you are allowed to buy Eagles, and then you are a main distributor, and you then send them out to whatever the other demands are, which are in the United States, their primary large dealers, such as like Mike Maloney, GoldSilver.com, although Mike might have graduated up to where he could buy directly, I don't know. But the idea is that they go from a handful to everybody else, and usually through an intermediary of some type, which would be your Dylan Gage, your Miles Franklin, I mean, you name it, anybody out there on the internet that does a lively business. Okay. Is J.P. Morgan in the initial loop? Yes. Silver Eagles are the most popular coin out there, obviously. However, I think what Steve Rocco shows is that if it was just J.P. Morgan, then how do you account for the fact that Maples, the Euro silver coin, and even the Australian all had increases as well? So basically it's silver demand. Certainly I don't think J.P. Morgan has gone across the board. One thing I'll just throw out there before I forget was that after Ted's article, I did a bit of a survey and asked some of the larger dealers like, GoldSilver.com, my friend Mike Maloney, some of the other big dealers in the country that I know either on a first name basis or know quite well. And one thing that really hadn't occurred to me, and certainly I learned something new about silver, I never said I knew everything, in fact I'm always learning more, was there's been a very large increase in the amount of IRAs that are precious metals IRAs. And by law, if you're going to start an IRA as a U.S. citizen, you have to buy silver or gold Eagles. Okay, so it's a one-way street there. And as you know, Sean, there's been a lot of people like yourself that have awakened a great many that maybe don't have any ability to save outside of their IRA, or that's their primary savings vehicle, and they've awoken and seen, ads by GoldSilver.com, Miles Franklin, and on and on. I don't want to leave anybody out. I don't want to just pitch any certain coin dealers that I'm familiar with, but Press, many of them have advertorials constantly almost showing you that you can put precious metals in an IRA, and that has gone up substantially. So that alone accounts for some of it. Not to say that J.P. Morgan hasn't bought more than whatever, but I think it's I don't think it's very well documented. The IRA thing could be better documented. You could Google it, probably start some research. I haven't done so yet. And then I think Steve Rocco's comments are worth weighting in your thinking, because obviously there's been an increase across the board. The last thing I want to mention, I don't want to scare anybody, Sean, but it bears mentioning because the next to the last time I was down in Los Angeles at goldsilver.com doing some work with Mike on some of his films, we were in the conference room, and one of his guys brought in a couple of Silver Eagles and said, okay, Mr. Silver Guru, which one of these is a counterfeit? And I looked at them, I held them, studied them pretty closely, and then what I did, Sean, was I dropped them, or actually spun them on the conference room table and listened. And by listening a couple times, said, this one is real, this one is not. So you're right. But it was a counterfeit from China. And it was pretty hard to detect. And I've seen a fair amount of eagles in my life, as you well know. So I'm just warning people that it is the most counterfeited coin out there. Not to, upset anybody, but just, buyer beware. If you're getting too good a deal on Silver Eagles, you might question why you are. And if you get a great deal on Eagles, I would suggest you buy a few and make sure that they're the real deal before you proceed with a big purchase.
Yeah, absolutely. Buy from a reputable dealer. That's key. It's interesting when we think about the intrinsic value of precious metals, silver and gold in physical form, David. You and I both know that most of our friends, neighbors, and colleagues don't own any precious metals at all. And if they do, they own them in paper form through IRAs or 401ks or direct relationships with brokers like Ameritrade, E-Trade, etc. Very few people own precious metals in physical form. Little anecdotal story here. Right over Christmas, I had a small shipment of silver coins come in, government-issued coins. These happen to be the 1 1/4 ounce buffaloes from the Wildlife Series from Canada, and they're just beautiful coins. 1 1/4 ounce, very strange size, but a beautiful coin. And when my little boy, he's 8 years old, saw them, he held one in his hand and he said, Dad, how much is this one worth? And I told him it was only worth about $20. And he was astonished. He thought it had to be worth at least $500, $1,000, because they are so beautiful. Because there is this heartfelt response to precious metals when you hold them in your hand. Kind of the long way to go about asking you this next question, circling back to J.P. Morgan and this Ted Butler article. I guess the good news is, David, whether or not Ted is right or wrong, the fact is that there have been record purchases and record demand for physical precious metals, Silver Eagles specifically. And if it's J.P. Morgan that's buying them, certainly that supports what you and I have been saying for so long, what you and I and others have been saying for so long. Silver is tremendously undervalued. It has intrinsic, tangible value. And it's a real-world asset in a world of paper. So whether or not it's the little guy or J.P. Morgan, it's a big story. And if it's J.P. Morgan, it's even a bigger story. Now, you have a relationship with Charles Savoy, who's an extremely talented researcher when it comes to silver. In fact, maybe no one's done more or better research than Charles Savoy. Charles Savoy doesn't necessarily agree with Ted's synopsis on this thing either, does he?
No, he does not. And let me plug Charlie a little bit more. Because, number one, he wrote exclusively for silver-investor.com for years and years, and all of that's still archived on the website.
Right.
Now, most of these articles are very weighty, meaning you almost have to be an academic or sincerely interested in the silver markets and the delicacies and intricacies of the market. But if you took the time over the next, few months to read everything Charlie has written on the silver market, particularly the price suppression schemes that have gone on for a very, very long time, you would probably be as knowledgeable about the silver market than nearly anybody on the planet. It'd be quite a read, it's quite a task. Since so, I don't know, it's been a few years now, probably 2 or 3, he's branched out, he's created his own website, he's resurrected the Silver Stealers, he's done more articles, and And of course we still publish his work. But if you want to go back from the beginning, you can go to our site. I'm not recommending you do or you don't.
No, I do. I recommend people check it out. Silver-investor.com. Now, just to flesh this out a little further, his Silver Squelchers series is absolutely astonishing. I've never seen any more detailed account. In fact, this is the groundbreaking stuff if you want to learn about the Pilgrims. If you want to learn about how old this silver suppression scheme is and how it operates at the very highest levels, even above the bankers, check out the Silver Squelcher series from Charles Savoy. So, sorry, David, go ahead.
No, I agree. And, just keep on that thread of thinking. I mean, everyone heard the Illuminati and the Freemasons and the Club of Rome and on and on. But very few heard about the Pilgrims. Mm-hmm. And Charlie's the first one to bring the Pilgrims to my attention. And again, I'm not a know-it-all. I'm a try to be a learn-it-all. And that was like, wow, this guy really goes deep. And, of course, I've got the book. It's hard to get. I've read it. It's very interesting. But this is one of the top, I'll call it secret, quote-unquote, societies out there that very few are aware of. It's interesting occasionally, Sean, that I'll get someone, that reads some of his work and comes to me and is just like so excited and exuberant and says, well, why doesn't everybody know about this? And, of course, the answer is because very few people take the time to study, read, do the research that Charlie has done, so a tip of the hat again to him. Yeah. But moving onward, I want to go on a tangent very briefly here and look at some of the stalwarts that the mainstream Mockingbird press that you refer to constantly does. They really, tout out, Warren Buffett, and, he's anti-gold, and, wouldn't you buy land? Land can produce this, gold just sits there, and it's dug out of the ground and then buried back in the ground and on and on. But they never bring up the fact that he bought 129.7 million ounces of silver. It's like, well, you don't like gold, Mr. Buffett, but you seem to like silver. Why is that? They never asked that question in the mainstream.
That's right. Well, he saw what a value it was at $5 or $6, and I just want to remind people that despite the trillions and literally trillions upon trillions upon trillions of dollars that have been printed since even Buffett owned silver, the price now, David, is only slightly more than double than where Buffett was buying it.
Yeah, it's incredible, and I drilled down a little further, and that's an extremely important point. But silver has utility value. I mean, Buffett makes fun of gold. I'm not anti-gold. Anyone that knows me and really knows me, knows that. But silver has utility value. I mean, it's something that's an antimicrobial. Yeah. It reflects light. It conducts heat. It's essential for anything electronic or electrical. We couldn't have today's technology without silver, and Buffett knows that. Right. And that, but it's never asked. That's my point. It's like interesting. So people that are top level only, that the mainstream Mockingbird press is the only information they receive. They would make they probably connect gold and silver on the same, or more or less. And if Buffett doesn't like gold, then that's spill over. I'd love to do a survey sometime and just ask the man on the street, do you know who Warren Buffett is? And if you got out an affirmative, then say, does he like silver or gold? Does he like them? And just see what the response would be.
Yeah, and most people have no idea about precious metals. It's so interesting because our culture is so absolutely detached from what was once real money in this country. They took the real money out of our coins in the 60s, and of course they took the real money out of our dollar bills, out of our paper money, back during the foundation of the Federal Reserve. Of course, those listening know very well that paper money used to say redeemable in gold, redeemable in silver, and they were called silver and gold certificates because those were paper IOUs for the precious metals that were in the vaults. Of course, none of the banks have precious metals in the vaults anymore, and if you go to your local bank and you want to withdraw $10,000 from Wells Fargo, I can tell you right now there's a good chance they won't have it, or it'll take 10 minutes to get the money together because the banks rarely have a whole lot of paper even on hand. And that's really the stunning part, isn't it, David? You talk about what would our neighbors and friends say about Warren Buffett and his thoughts on silver and gold. Most of our neighbors and friends don't even think about silver and gold, despite the fact that the U.S. federal government is now more than $18 trillion in debt, right? The credit card has been run up so far that they're now opening new credit cards to pay old credit cards in the greatest Ponzi scheme that ever was. And strangely, your friends, my friends, and so many of our friends and neighbors and colleagues think this thing is just going to go on forever. And it can't.
Absolutely can't. And we're seeing that now. I mean, I remember doing a show with Jim Popova years ago, and talking about the failure, and I said the failure would be when the Keynesian model doesn't work, which is adding more money to the money supply, to what we call priming the pump, so the economy restarts and starts to move up on its own. Well, they did, QE1, QE2, QE3, and they keep trying the same thing, but it has not restarted the economy. Certainly there's been areas, 3D printing is maybe a subset that looks pretty, good, but no, the overall economy just continues to go sideways or down. And there's easy ways to prove that if you're objective and look at the true, facts. But that's the idea, and that's it. So you can't get enough of what you don't need. What we don't need is more phony money or the Ponzi scheme. I think the Ponzi scheme is the best expression you can use because most people understand what that is.
Right.
And what it means is you have to have a greater and greater foolish base to pay the people at the top that got in early.
Right.
And now we've run out of people.
Right.
The scheme went on, in my view, longer than I thought it would initially, and I'll admit my error here again, going back a decade or so, and I thought, we're getting pretty close. But then they brought China into the fold, and they brought China into the Western banking system. Well, if you got 1.2 billion more people to put this scheme onto, you've added a great deal to the base that you can fool and put into the scheme.
Yeah.
So this went on longer than I had surmised going back, as I say, a decade or more.
Well, when I did a microdoc a few years ago called Why Silver, Why Gold, I cited in that microdoc the quote from Lawrence Kotlikoff, who was talking about the $13 trillion at that time in stated federal debt. But, of course, he wanted people to focus on the $202 trillion in unfunded liabilities. But, that was just a few years ago, and it was $13 trillion in debt. And now the officially stated debt is $18.14 trillion. Here's an article from Zero Hedge. U.S. debt soars by $100 billion on the last day of 2014, hitting record of $18.14 trillion. So we know that the Treasury, we know that the Fed, we know that the powers that be are playing games with these numbers if they wanted the debt to stay below $18 trillion. And then on the last day of 2014, suddenly it soared by $100 billion. God only knows where this money is being spent. God only knows how many people are on the take. It seems the whole Congress and Senate are on the take, which is why we've lost our republic to the extent that the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights is being trampled on a daily basis. And the wiretapping by the NSA seems to just be fine with everybody. The torture, Americans seem fine with the torture and the CIA torture. It's all fine as long as they can go down to TGI Fridays on Friday and get a $7.99 sandwich. I don't understand it, David, but we're preaching to the choir because none of our listeners understand it. None of our listeners understand at this point how sheeple can remain sheeple. And I've long maintained that you need to want to wake up in order to wake up. You can't wake up, a lot of times you can't even wake up your own friends and family, David.
That's true. Even in my own case, my own mother really doesn't get the gold story. I mean, she's sympathetic to me and my work, but really doesn't get the big picture. And my father, when he was alive, did, but nonetheless, it's very difficult at times, and I don't, pound the table. I just state the case and let it go, and I don't restate it. I think once is enough with its close friends and family, but nonetheless, there will be an awakening, Sean, because once the ship is sunk, everyone knows how it might have been saved. And when this thing goes down, there's going to be a lot of people screaming at the top of their lungs at the Mockingbird Press saying, why didn't you tell us? Well, they never told you, or they alluded to things that were inaccurate or half-truths. And there'll be people like you that will come to the fore after people do the research after the fact and say, oh my goodness, I wish I would have known about SGT, because had I been listening to that for the last couple of years, I might have, and they'll lie to themselves, excuse my frankness, but a lot of people are a bit delusional. They'll say, oh, if I would have heard that, I would have acted. You know what? I'll bet you that your listeners, maybe 50%, actually take action. Some of them look at it as like entertainment. It's like, wow, David sounds really sincere, and Sean sounds as sincere as David, and wow, they're really concerned, and they really seem passionate. No, I mean, this has been shown time and again and again and again. And as I began in the early 2000s, I said it's the first time it's a global phenomenon. As this currency, the U.S. dollar, goes, so goes the world. Now, I have to caveat that slightly with this BRICS And even there, I'm not so sure that the bankers are on top controlling both sides. I really don't know.
Right.
I like to think that there could be a breakaway, but I really don't know that for a fact.
It seems authentic. I mean, the pushback from Putin, the pushback from China, the pushback from BRICS against the dollar does seem authentic. But to your point, who knows? This may all be part of the plan to just move us away from the dollar, move the world away from the dollar and into a one-world currency ultimately. But you're right, we don't know what with 100% certainty. But the BRICS do seem authentic. People do seem fed up with the dollar.
And I lean that way, Sean. I really do. And even if they're going along with the bankers, let's say pulling the strings, so to speak, I'm, too good a mathematician to know that there aren't anomalies and there's random events. And you could pretend to go along with it and then all of a sudden, turn the table, so to speak, pull the table up like in the money changers in the temple, and all of a sudden say, no, you know what, you're not ruling us anymore. We've got our system, we've got our banks, we've got our gold-backed currency, and get out of here kind of thing. So, I'm open-minded. I don't know. But what I do know is that just because it appears that we've always been controlled doesn't mean we're always going to be controlled.
Right. Well, and to back you up there, regardless of what's going on with the BRICS, the fact of the matter that cannot be ignored, and the sheeple at their own peril ignore it, is the fact that the dollar is not going to be the world's reserve currency for very much longer. It just absolutely is not. It can't. The average lifespan of a paper currency is, 40 years? I think we're in year 45 on this petrodollar. This thing is on its last legs. Whether people want to believe me or you about that is up to them. But if they want to take their news, if they want to take their information from the mainstream Mockingbird media, if they want to take their news from highly compensated CFR members like Brian Williams and Aaron Burnett, let them have at it. Because to your point, and I appreciate you saying it, places like IntelliHub, Silver Doctors, Brother John F., The Daily Sheeple, TruthStream Media, Zero Hedge, and your site, silver-investor.com, are great sources for real information. And I'm here to tell everybody that none of the people at any of the websites I just mentioned are CFR members making millions of dollars a year. So you take your news where you want to take it. All David and I are trying to do is help people. So if this information matters to you, try to share it with your sheeple people, friends, and neighbors, because I maintain, David, that time is running short on this dollar paradigm, and I know you believe that too. So much so that I think you and our friend Daryl Schoon are putting together some sort of symposium here in the future. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What is that called? I got an email from you, and I just want to flush that out for people so people are aware of it.
Yeah, if you go to the website, our silver-investor.com, it's right at the top on the front page. It's called The Checkerboard Game, and it's looking at the bigger paradigm, which we've been discussing. Really, is the monetary powers to be beyond it, and how to break free of it, at least to understand how it works and how it operates. And Marshall Thurber is actually the main speaker at this event. We'll be in Spokane, Washington. All the details are on the website. But it's a game that is played that actually puts people physically in a monetary system and realizes how societies form around a monetary system and what alliances they build and what kind of biases and prejudices they have because they become collectivists. It's a very interesting game. It's an enlightening event, and that starts probably the first 2 hours. Once that's accomplished, then people will have sort of an innate bodily knowledge almost of what's going on a global or a macro perspective. By the way, Marshall Thurber taught Tony Robbins early on. He's a pretty powerful, deep thinker, friend of Buckminster Fuller, who wrote Grinch of the Giants. If you haven't read it, I suggest you do. So I think it's going to be a very powerful, more, let's say, global, more of a macro picture, excuse me, than what I usually do. And it'll be, these two friends of mine that will be with me at this event. So certainly, if you have the means to get to Spokane to participate, you'll be one of the few on the planet, because this game has not been played very often, but it is a very profound wake-up call that if you participate, you can't help but realize at a very deep level why, for example, the Congress can be bought and paid for. And I just want to go on a tangent there, Sean, if I might. What really upsets me, and I said this on an earlier radio show years ago, is that all these creditors, uphold or take an oath to the Constitution, and they're breaking it left and right. And so who are the people that are really the terrorists or the tyrants? If you make an oath that you're going to uphold something for all enemies, foreign and domestic, and you continually do the opposite, who's to be held accountable here?
Yeah.
Is it the guys on the street that say, no, we believe in two things. One, doing everything you say, and two, not infringing on the rights of anyone else. It's pretty simple.
Right.
But, you know, today, as you well know, and you've done so much to help others wake up, hopefully, is that this is the exact opposite of what's going on today.
Yeah, the people you speak of that will not uphold the Constitution and are elected representatives of the people, they're traitors. If they won't do their job, if they are on the take, if they represent corporations over people, they're traitors. And it just needs to be said. It's a word that's not said often enough, and we need to bring it back, because the people that will not uphold the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and stand up against the corporatocracy are traitors. It's plain and simple. Hey, as we wrap up, David, we're securely in the hands of 2015 now. We made it somehow. And, without asking you for predictions, because you and I both know predictions at this point, when the big banks and the international cartel controls the price of physical gold and silver through the paper markets, asking you for a prediction would be a fool's game. But I just want to get your sense before we wrap up. What's your feeling about 2015?
Well, I think it's going to accelerate. In other words, I think there are going to be more and more items in the news that are really important. You know, the war theme is going to continue, probably accelerate. You're going to see food dynamic come to the fore more and more. Food prices, shortage of food, water, of course, is a key issue as well. And as far as the metals go, you know, always play the games. I get asked sometimes by the banks and some of the publications what my forecast, and that really is a guessing game. I'm much better looking at the data and giving, short-term prediction like, 2 or 3 months out. But regardless of that, the place to look for on a technical basis is, $26 silver and $15.50 gold. Once we get over those levels, then you can rest assured that the bull market is going to kind of accelerate upward. I think Martin Armstrong, who gets a great deal of followers, is looking for it. And if I read his work, and I don't look at it all, believe me, I think it's 3/4 of the way into 2015. I think is where he's either seeing the bottom or where we start to come up. I think we're coming up probably in January, at least in good-sized bounds. But regardless, if you use your head and think logically and understand history, in other words, if you listen to SGT report and have taken even part of it in, you'll understand why having precious metals is so ultimately important. And that doesn't mean you have to put your life savings in precious metals. What it means is you have to grab enough to where you're comfortable. And that's all you really need. At that point, you can be secure. And there's other things to get, of course. And you know what? If, things do get better. I mean, in some, tiny cases they are, but the overall economy certainly isn't. The more repressed, suppressed, and lied to we are, the more uncertain things become, and the less trustworthy we are as a nation or a world. And that's the most important thing. In fact, in my new book, Silver Manifesto, that will be out in 2015, the last chapter is Beyond Silver. And I asked a lot of questions. I didn't give many answers, but some of the questions I asked is, what does it mean to be truly human, and how civilized are we really? I mean, look at the war efforts that's gone on for time immemorial. I mean, we're sitting there killing each other all over the planet, usually for power or wealth or resources. Something is drastically wrong with the human condition, in my view.
Oh my God, I couldn't agree with you more, and I know that our listeners feel the same way. Right around Christmas time, there was several great videos released by folks. I think one of them was from We Are Change, and it talked about the World War I stand down, where for several days both sides just stopped firing bullets at each other as they fought over worthless dirt, and they actually played football, and they came together, and it was the powers that be above them that put a quick end to that and got them back to fighting the bankers' wars. As our good friend Mike Rivero has constantly reminded us, all wars are banker wars. That's the fact, and so many of us know it. Guys, our guest has been David Morgan from silver-investor.com, home of the Morgan Report. And David, I know you're always eager for people to subscribe, and they could even get a free trial. Is that correct?
Absolutely. You can get 30 days for absolutely free. You can get free information at our YouTube feed, which is Silver Guru, or my Twitter feed at SilverGuru22. And there's a free e-letter that comes out once a week. We don't bomb your email every day. It's once a week. It's kind of a summation of all the interviews that I do, questions from readers, and useful information.
Yeah, absolutely useful information. You've been a good friend to SGT Report over the years. We really do appreciate your time, David.
My pleasure. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you. And guys, thanks so much for listening. We wish you a heartfelt, wonderful 2015. Happy New Year. Thanks for visiting us at SGT Report and thelibertymill.com. Thanks for checking out silverinvestor.com. I know David appreciates it. Have a great week.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.